Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Selling Fort Collins podcast. I am here with Dr. Martin Shields. He's a professor of economics at Colorado State University. Amongst other things, he also is an active member of the CSU Regional Economic Development Institute, where he focuses on economic research and teaching. Martin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Greg. Happy to be here.
I really appreciate your time. You're somebody that when I was getting started in this industry 20 years ago, I remember going to the regional forums, local forums, and when they brought in the economic expert, it was always you. I wondered if there was anybody else at the time that actually was projecting things. And I don't know if there was or not. I think you were clearly the best. That's why everybody was seeking you. So to have you here on the show with me is an honor. I appreciate your time. We're going to get into some fun things, but to start it off, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started in Fort Collins at CSU and what's your background?
All right, Greg, thanks. I've been here since 2006. I was brought in as a part of a group which at the time was called the Northern Colorado Economic Development Corporation to do research on the Northern Colorado economy. And so I was kind of a joint appointment doing some economic development work and doing work at CSU. I had moved here from Pennsylvania with brought my kids with me, and was really interested in looking at economic growth in cities. I had spent a lot of time looking at rural places in my previous job at Penn State. So I was really interested in looking at like a vibrant, growing economy and the challenges that are facing in those places. And CSU called me up and said, consider applying for this job. And I said, yeah, sure, I'll take that. And I get here at 2006, and maybe 14 months later, all hell breaks loose in the economy, and I felt like I had personally been responsible for crashing this economy because it was doing just fine. I get here, and then the Great Recession happens, housing market crisis. It was a really interesting time in economics. I make a joke that, like you're talking about in the introduction, about how people valued my opinion, and I came out here and I remember telling the joke, and it wasn't that funny at the time, but about the recession, and we were doing employment forecasts at the time, and I said, yes, I got the magnitude right, but the sign wrong. And I thought, what have I gotten myself into? This is a really difficult business to make economic projections, but I'm still standing after all these years and trying to weigh in on things.
Yeah, probably an unprecedented time to start making economic projections, because particularly at these conferences you were speaking at, these forums I attended, everyone is like looking for the good news. I mean, in those days, everyone is in it. It's not looking good. They're wanting good news. They're wanting to. I wondered, did that affect how you would approach those forums or your talks anyway, wanting to give more of a positive spin on things? Or was it always just, hey, I'm going to give you the real bare facts and, you're going to like it or not?
Yeah. So economics, some people call it the dismal science, because we kind of are always sticking to the facts. But at the same time, you go into a forum and people, you don't want to just bring people down and say doom and gloom. But it doesn't do anyone any service at all to mislead them or to sugarcoat anything, because their livelihoods are at stake and they want to make the best decisions possible. So you got to kind of try to be honest with them. 2008 was just, that recession was just really unprecedented, and most of our models didn't see that coming, these financial market issues that we had at the time. And so if you think back to it, Greg, and I know you remember this, it was like the absolute moments of uncertainty in that time where the Federal Reserve Bank is saying, if we don't do something, we won't have an economy on Monday. That was what Alan Greenspan was saying at the time. And just think about the emotional roller coaster that people were on at that time, and just wondering what's going to happen next. And then to be up standing in front of people like that and just wanting to be, soothe them a little bit, but understanding that these are really difficult times and that people are struggling. And that was a was a really surreal time to be in this business.
Right. And I asked that last question, actually kind of knowing the answer to some degree before asking it, because I went through some of my notes from an event that I attended in 2009, where you were speaking. And it was interesting looking at the notes that I took. I have all my notebooks still. And what I wrote down was save money. Net worth is probably going to be lower at the end of 2009 than at the start of the year. So whatever you said, it must not have been too rosy, too optimistic, and was likely very accurate. So it was fun to go back and look at that. For me, now here we are, 2024, kind of, wrapping up 2024, and we've come so far. I mean, the last 15, 20 years here. We've seen this robust tech sector. We've seen the healthcare sector really thriving. We have one of the more recently named the fourth best downtown square in the country by USA Today. Obviously, Colorado State University is doing better than ever. The student population, I believe, we're by far now the highest enrollment in the state. So all the different departments, they're thriving, all the things happening. There's all of these things that have happened, really picked up steam over the last 10, 15 years. I mean, how would you describe that journey? What are some of the things that stand out to you when you think back to those times we just discussed, 2008, 2009, 2010, coming forward to, 2015, 2016, where things were really starting to change, and then today to 2024, what stands out?
Yeah, well, the first thing that stands out was the downturn in '08, right? And how long the recovery took. It took about 5 years to get us back to where we were before the recession started in northern Colorado. And one thing that people have a hard time remembering when you talk about wealth being less, right? The stock market lost almost a third of its value in just a few short weeks. And to think that the turmoil that puts people in their retirement savings cut by 30%, or their plans for retirement to, am I going to be able to retire? These are conversations I was having with people at the time. And that felt like in the moment that it was never going to end. And we slowly dug ourselves out of this hole, and the economy took off. And it's really not taken a breath since. It's been a remarkable 10 years since the recovery took hold that we've been pretty good employment growth, pretty good wage growth. Obviously, housing prices have appreciated. So the economy in northern Colorado was incredibly resilient, and it's remarkable how it's doing today.
What do you think is driving that? If you were going to name the top 2 or 3 things,
that's a good question. The economy has diversified in a way that it's kind of moved into the sectors that are growing nationally, right? We had a manufacturing dependent economy in the early 2000s, late 1990s, when we had HP and all these folks that were doing manufacturing. And in the 2001 recession, those sectors were pretty hard hit, and they even went away for the most part. The manufacturing side of it largely went away, but what was left was this kind of modern, forward-looking economy that was healthcare dominated, information, creativity, engineering, like those sectors that are driving the U.S. economy in its global leadership today. We are well represented in those sectors, so we didn't have to worry so much about being dependent on a manufacturing sector or something like that. So we're able to kind of with the diversified economy. Of course, my employer, CSU, is a huge engine in here to this whole thing.
I mean, the biggest engine, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to toot that horn too loudly, but it's an important part of the economy. There's no doubt about it. We've got be 1,200 faculty members, and we've got several thousand people, professional administrators, and working in labs and doing all these things.
And we talk about enrollment growing, which is the metric everyone uses.
Yeah,
there needs to be more teachers. There's a butterfly effect.
Yeah, it's a. I've spent most of my life in college towns, and so I might be a little bit oblivious to the true importance of CSU as an economic engine, but it really touches all corners of this place.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think? When you look at the tech sector and you look at the healthcare sector, those have been pretty big drivers too, right?
Oh, healthcare certainly has been an important driver. As our economy ages, we kind of expect that, right? Mm-hmm. People, as they're older, need more healthcare services, but we also have, become more of as the place grows, it becomes more of a regional health magnet. We've got a couple good hospitals in town that attract people from all across the area. It's kind of, as you said, another driver of the economy that way.
Yeah. Have you noticed any kind of trend in the demographics of people in your research and your study who are moving here? I don't know if you're profiling the demographics of people who are coming into Fort Collins and maybe coming into the larger Larimer County area, but have you noticed any trends there? Because, I think we talked a little bit before we started rolling. I've noticed a few being in real estate, and I'm curious what the data says, if anything.
Yeah, the Fort Collins is a pretty young place still, right? Mm-hmm. This vibrant tech center attracting the new economy workers. Obviously, the students that I have, a lot of them want to stay here after they graduate. And they all I want to do is figure out how to stay in Fort Collins, is what some of them say to me. So we're a young place, but we are overall as a population aging. And what I think we're attracting is kind of like a lot of folks that might be early retirement years. We were having this conversation earlier, early retirement years, near retirement, maybe a little bit more affluent in the sense of an ability to move here even to be closer to their kids. But young and participating in the outdoor economy that they love, the things that are really attractive to the more active retiree. I think that's kind of what I hate to say a niche, but that might be a lot of the demographic of people moving here. Young professionals, and then sometimes their parents.
Yeah. One thing I want to zoom in on that you said was your students are telling you that all they want to do is figure out a way to stay in Fort Collins. My perception, having been here 20 years, is that, even 10 years ago, certainly 15 years ago, that wasn't the case. It was more, hey, we're going to Denver. We're going somewhere else where there's jobs, where there's more of kind of a vibrant urban atmosphere. I think these students at CSU, these talented students from all over the world, wanting to stay here, actually just saying to you that all I want to do is find a way to stay in Fort Collins. It feels like a relatively new phenomena. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't, like you're saying, every semester I ask my students, first aid class, where do you want to be? And when I grew up in Michigan, and when someone asked me that question, I thought anywhere but here, right? And it wasn't anything about Michigan in particular or family or I just wanted to see something else. And the students today have realized that this is a pretty good place to be for a young adult. There are employment opportunities. Housing is a little bit more affordable than when they thought about going to Denver before. They can't. A lot of them can't imagine owning a home down in Denver now with the pricing of housing down there. So this seems like a place that a lot of them are thinking this is a pretty good place for me. I've enjoyed my time here. It's a safe community. It's close to everything. I can get to Denver if I need to. That kind of sentiment I'm seeing in my students quite a bit these days.
Yeah, and would we have a healthy local economy here? I mean, how would you describe? So a lot of our listeners are, outside of this market, maybe considering moving here. How would you describe our local economy, maybe to somebody who's not familiar with it at all?
Okay, I would say that no economy is recession proof,
Sure.
but this economy certainly takes its punches pretty well. The diversification, the way we're diversified, the importance of the university, which can't be understated. Pretty solid economic foundations in industries that are, like you said, healthcare earlier, information, computers. Those sectors seem to be doing okay and pretty recession proof, knock on wood, so far for this place. And so what that translates into lower unemployment rates. Historically, the unemployment rate here is lower. The labor force participation rate, which is another statistic, the percentage of adults that are looking for a job and can find one. Those indicators are all really positive here compared to most places. So I do have some concerns. Some of the economy doesn't always benefit everyone all the time, and so one of my own personal causes, I guess, is I really want lower wage workers to have a chance to participate and thrive in an economy as well. And lately, that sector was really hard hit by the pandemic. Okay, so we did some research on who was hit hardest by it in northern Colorado, and it was those restaurant workers and others that were affected by the stay-at-home orders. And I was just so scared for those folks to what's their life going to be like. But over the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of wage growth even on the lower end spectrum, and we hadn't seen that in a long time. And so that kind of made me feel like we're building this kind of inclusive economy a little bit that provides some people opportunities that may not have had them before.
Yeah, that's interesting. So just in the past few years, we've seen that kind of lower end of wage. We've seen stronger growth in that lower end in these last few years than we've seen previously.
Yeah, and that's something that hadn't happened. Like I've studied a lot on causes and consequences of growing income inequality, which has been plaguing this country for a long time. And it was this great divergence between people with a college degree and people without one. That's, we've had this in terms of wage divergence. And it was because the college grads were getting higher and higher wages every year, and the high school graduates were very flat. And over the last couple of years, that gap has actually shrunk. And it's not because college kids are making less; it's because those low-income workers are actually doing better than they had for a long time. Yeah. I know there's people still struggling in this community, but there is some glimmers of hope for them economically, at least.
Well, it's fascinating to hear about those glimmers. I remember, traveling. This was about 15 years ago. I was in Dubai, and I'm walking around Dubai, and it was just very, very interesting because you would see at the time, the tallest building in the world and these amazingly, luxurious places. And then you would go, not even a full block in one direction, and it would be complete. People living in the worst conditions imaginable. And I'd never seen anything like that before. And I think in certain cities around the country, you see something similar in some areas where you just see there's a really big gap there. And that's something that no place wants as it's growing. As we grow, as we deal with some of these issues that have been dealt with before, like in Austin, Texas, or Minneapolis, Minnesota, some of these markets that I think you can make an argument that we're trending towards if you look at their local economies that are robust and kind of heavy in tech and healthcare and have universities. As we're trending towards those, two questions. One, what comp would you use? What do you think Fort Collins is in the future? And then two, what are some things that we need to do to ensure that we're trending in that direction in the healthiest way possible?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about who's our comp community. That's you realtors and your comps.
Yeah, realtors and our comps. And I
Yeah.
think it's fascinating for anyone who's not only living in this area for sure, but who might be considering moving to this area. What is it going to look like here? And let's just say you just you disappeared and you came back in 15 years. What do you think it's going to be similar to?
Well, it's interesting because we've got Denver, which is certainly the growth pole of the Intermountain West, right? And so that will always, well, not always, can't say always, but for the foreseeable future, be the economic hub. But then oftentimes what we see are these, what we might call edge cities or second cities that spring up an hour's drive from these primary cities. And so I think we're going to be distinct from Denver. We'll be bigger as a city. People want to be in Colorado. They want to be in northern Colorado. They want to be in Fort Collins. And so we're going to be bigger. And with that, we're going to bring in even more diversity in industry and all of that. I don't see us turning into Austin, with more than 1 million people.
Sure,
I hope
from a
we don't.
population standpoint, it would be
I don't
challenging
see
for
us
that to be possible.
turn into Minneapolis. There's just a big city that's its own unique entity, and we're going to be in the shadow of Denver a little bit. But I think that people are okay with that, right? I think that's what's good about this place still is that it's still a smaller place, right? And with a lot of character and a lot of unique attributes. And I think people like that about this place. So I don't know if we have a comp. That's a good question. I'll have to think about that when I get home today.
Well, it's fascinating. I mean, if you look at just those two cities we mentioned, Austin and Minneapolis, both. I think if you look at what they were like in the mid '90s, I think there's a really good argument to Fort Collins is kind of like that now, maybe even trending closer to the late '90s. At that point in time, these places had populations in the 600, 700,000 people range already, but those are larger areas. So certainly from a population standpoint, those places are higher, but if you look at Fort Collins and you look at the industries and the sectors and the job growth, they're fascinating comps to me. One thing you said in there that was really interesting is that you see us being bigger than Denver, bigger than Denver. And that's probably not something that a lot of people can really envision right now.
Oh, I hope I didn't say that. I think we're going to be bigger than Denver. I didn't mean to say that.
I think maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but is you see this being like another Denver? Do you maybe not bigger population wise?
I think we could, like the Springs is a good example, right? The Springs is the second biggest city in Colorado, and we're not there yet. I think they're around 500,000 or so. We're at 200,000 in Fort Collins and 300,000 in the county. I think that thing, like they're an hour south of Denver, we're an hour north of Denver. I could kind of see those two places as kind of being more comparable. They've got the institution, they've got the Air Force Academy, of course, which is much smaller, but they've got the whole defense industry there, and that might be a decent comp actually. Like we're growing up into the Springs.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting comp, and I mean, population-wise, if you look at northern Colorado as a whole, so we're not just talking about Fort Collins, but Loveland to the south, Greeley, Windsor, Timnath, Wellington to the north. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see the populations, if you're looking at that as one area, then maybe you start comparing it to some larger cities. But looking at just Fort Collins, I would agree. I think Colorado Springs is a good comp. I mean, Boulder is interesting. One thing that I found interesting just over the past 2-3 years, and maybe this is just kind of a non-conventional way of thinking, or controversial even, but walking through Pearl Street in Boulder, I just noticed vacancy. There is a lot more retail vacancy in downtown Boulder than there is in our amazingly thriving Old Town Fort Collins right now. I mean, very, very visible on the retail standpoint, restaurants and shops. What's less visible is the office vacancy. The office vacancy right now in Boulder is on a percentage basis roughly triple of what our office vacancy is in Old Town Fort Collins. So it's fascinating to me that I'm seeing such a difference there. And Boulder's beautiful. It's an amazing city. They have a great university, a lot of good things about Boulder. But I think when you're talking about downtowns thriving, that's what we have here. And, I bring that up to just make that next comparison too to Colorado Springs. I think that's something that the Springs hasn't really been able to figure out. Their downtown is okay. It's obviously more spread out than ours, a larger geographical area. It just doesn't have that vibe. It doesn't have that energy. It's sleepy.
Yeah, a little more decentralized.
It's a lot more decentralized, I think. And so when I'm just comparing these places that are within an hour of Denver, that, I don't think there is any place that even comes close to Fort Collins, just from a quality of life standpoint, from enjoying a vibrant downtown, and we can get into a lot of other things too. But as we're going back to the question of how we're going to grow, because clearly we're going to grow. Clearly people are moving here. The secret's out. What are some things that are there any concerns you have, or are things that we could do better at a city level to grow in a smart way? I mean, what are anything jump out at you there?
Yeah, so that's interesting. You talk about Boulder, and they've got pretty strict growth management regulations, right? And one of the results of that is really high property values, right? And that precludes a lot of people moving there, right? Or prohibits a lot of people. It just can't make it happen there. Lovely place, beautiful campus, beautiful setting. But it's hard to piece together, the money you need to buy a house, even if you have a pretty good tech job. So I can understand, those are the repercussions, I guess, of having a really strong growth management thing. And Fort Collins, I think, has paid attention to that. When you have $1.5 million small ranch homes, then you're making it very unaffordable for the largest swath of the population, right? And I think Fort Collins is more cognizant or understanding or open to allowing people from all sorts of different financial backgrounds to live here. And that's what I love about this place. My concern is always is water. I mean, it's pretty scarce in the West, and the precipitation forecasts going forward aren't necessarily, where we would like them to be in terms of to be able to support the growing population that we have. And then when water becomes more expensive, then housing becomes more expensive, and some people just won't be able to even afford to build a new home potentially, because the water tap fees are going to be expensive, and that's what I like the clarion or the siren that I hear in the future is, what are we going to do about water, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something, for those of you listening, if you go back and listen to the episodes with Mayor Jenny Arndt, we talk a lot about that. And where the city of Fort Collins is at with water, and just comparing that to the Fort Collins Loveland Water District and some of the other ones, and, learning about where they get their water. They all have a portfolio of water rights. It is a limited resource. It's becoming more expensive. And so it sounds like what your concern is I've heard this start a few times, is affordability being a even bigger issue going forward.
Yeah, I think that there's a whole bunch of upward pressure on housing prices right now beyond demand side. Like on the supply side of it, we're certainly going to see, we might see some labor challenges moving forward, right? And we certainly have water issues. And anytime that there's restrictions on build on the building side or whatever, all these things that add to costs, it's difficult for some people and some families to meet those costs.
Yeah. What labor challenges do you think we might have going forward? Do any jump out at you? Do you mean specifically with building and just, having the cost of labor with building, or do you see that being an issue in other sectors as well?
I think that it'll be interesting, so we just had an election where the people have spoken to some extent on what they think of immigration, right? And we rely as a country on an undocumented workforce in a lot of building sectors, and I'm just not going to deny that or ignore that. And if that labor pool is shrunk, made smaller, then wages are going to go up. That's just supply and demand. And if wages go up, then it's more expensive to build a house. So those types of things, and who knows what's the difference between what happens and what's said are often large, right? But if something happens where we're reducing the labor force in significant ways, then all those industries that rely on foreign-born workers are going to be hard hit by that, and they're going to have to pass those costs on to someone.
Right, and that's future homeowners who are already struggling to afford homes in certain markets, and Fort Collins is increasingly becoming one of those markets where it's getting more and more expensive.
Yeah, so this will be an interesting test of economics because we're hearing about deportations, we're hearing about tariffs, and these things are increased costs. Like a steel tariff will increase building costs. And so, economists have been pretty clear about what the labor market impacts and what the price impacts will be. But, society overall, or the voters have overall said that there's other things that are as important than the CPI and other things like that. So we're going to get a good test of our models, though, if some of these policies come to pass. And I don't want to make this a political podcast at all, but I'm just looking at things are going to be different potentially, and what the economic implications are of that.
Yeah, I think you're just pointing out that it's going to be fascinating to see what happens next there, and affordability is a concern. Let's talk about the good things. Expensive to live here? Increasingly, the answer is yes. But the quality of life. You've been here since 2006. Roughly, I've been here the same amount of time. What are some of the things that you and your family enjoy doing most in Fort Collins? Maybe it's a weekend, you have some free time. Kind of run me through the perfect Saturday.
The perfect Saturday nowadays is a little different. My kids are all out of the house, and so it's no longer driving them to soccer or dance or something like that. So my wife and I, we get away. We try to get out if we can. We like to ski. We like to. We talk about hiking a lot. Walking around Old Town is one of our favorite things to do. We like to just window shop and then pop into a pub or something like that and get a little drink and have happy hour but love being outside. We do everything we can, if it either in the yard or just walking around town or heading into the mountains a little bit. Just love being outside here.
I love that. So if you and your wife are going out for a beer, going out for coffee, dinner, what are some of your spots? Favorites?
Are we doing plugs now?
We were doing plugs.
Our favorite spot is, and we know this place all too well, is the Whiskey Still on College Avenue. Great bar staff, good cocktails, good food. But then we go to all sorts of different places. Rio, Crown Pub. The new place on Linden, Madre. What's that? Madre's. There's a new restaurant on Linden where Blind Pig used to be. Oh, it's fantastic. Mexican steakhouse.
Just opened. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we're out and about quite a bit. We play euchre two-handed euchre. It's a Midwest card game at the bar. So if anyone sees us sees a couple playing cards at the bar, it's probably going to be us.
I hope they'll come up and say hi now.
Yeah.
Whiskey Still is my favorite place in Old Town. I've been surprised. I asked this question to other guests, and no one has said the Whiskey Still yet, but I'm glad you did.
Oh, love the place.
It's amazing. Great cocktails, but yeah, like the elk. I'll get the elk with a couple of their sides. You get really good, well prepared wild game there. Highly recommend that place.
We're going to Sonny Lubbock's tonight to watch the Broncos with my in-laws. So that's another one of our favorites, the bar at Sonny's.
Yeah, there's not a better place to get a steak than Sonny's. That's a great places. Now take us inside the world of CSU a little bit. Now, you're shifting from a Saturday to your Monday through Friday when you're going to CSU. We haven't talked a lot about CSU on this podcast. You're the one person who's on the inside there. What's it like being a teacher there? What's campus like? What are some of the strengths of the university?
Oh, it's just, I love being on college campuses. I mean, I been in school forever, it feels like. I worked for a couple of years in Washington, D.C., but for all the other times I've been on a college campus. And so I'm a little bit divorced from reality and willfully so, or willingly so. I love all the ideas, right? And especially with a bigger school, because I work with engineers, and I play soccer with people from the vet school, and I play, I'm on faculty council, and I meet people from literature, and I meet people from health and exercise science, and their minds are always working on something. They're always thinking about something, and the curiosity is just what. The curiosity and they're all motivated by making something better for something, right? Everyone wants people to understand more, or to think better, or to invent more things, and it's the stew of ideas there that I love. And then you got all these. The students are amazing in the sense of, I mean, I think back to when I was 18, 19, 20 years old and just trying to figure stuff out, and thankful I had a place that let me experiment in relative safety. And I see the students. I teach a freshman seminar, and then I teach a senior seminar. And so I see the students from the day they walk in, and then I see them on the day they're walking out, and the growth that they have, and it's just incredibly rewarding to see these folks mature and as they leave to go hopefully do great things.
Yeah. A lot of them here in town.
Yeah, a lot of them here in town.
Which didn't used to happen before, which is interesting. What are some of, looking at the broader university outside of the economics department, what do you think are some of the programs that stand out? It just seems like there's been a lot happening there. People that I work with around town, they notice the cranes, they notice the new beautiful buildings going up. But I'm curious, what stands out to you in terms of any other programs there that are just doing really neat, exciting things?
Yeah, well, you always got to start with the vet school here, right? Mm-hmm. One of the top vet schools in the country, doing amazing research. And if you dig into what they do at the vet school, it's just so much more than teaching people to neuter a cat, right? It's amazing, like the research that goes on animal cancers that someday they hope to translate into human cancer research, just to improve the livelihoods, both of animals, of course, but then also the translational medicine that goes and helps humans. So you start there. The atmospheric science program is fascinating, and they're tucked away into the foothills, but their campus, but they've got people doing research on of course on hurricanes and other climate events, but just the things that they're doing in atmospheric science and putting satellites in there and improving weather forecasts and climate prediction models is cool stuff. I've got a friend who's doing research on blindness, and trying to prevent and cure different types of blindness. That's he's in one of the biology departments. I can't even remember. But I've got another friend that's he's always going to somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa working on malaria prevention. Just everyone is trying to make some difference, and be it in atmospheric science, like I said, or in medicine, But then what's interesting, I'm in the College of Liberal Arts, and in that College of Liberal Arts, we have music, theater, and dance, and we have the art program, and to see the creativity and the student projects that come out of those, it's really an amazing place. And for your listeners who might want to go into the CSU Art Gallery and just kind of see what they've got on their wall, or go check out a performance, go see one of the shows that the theater community puts on there. And it's such an asset that we have in this community.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I learn things every time I do these shows, and I didn't know we had an atmospheric science department doing these things. When people in town are talking about CSU, you're right, the vet school comes up a lot. It's a world class, really world famous veterinary school, and people fly over from all over the world with their pets, and their equine specialists will fly in from all over the world too. I know you might have heard this too, but David Letterman was in town not that long ago. I think it was a few years back. I believe with his dog. Some of the other celebrities, like Kevin Bacon, Emilio Estevez, Katherine Heigl, who's an actress. And so it's fascinating. So that's where the attention goes, especially it's been in the paper. I think it's a roughly $300 million facility that is going to be built as part of the CSU vet school. So, but hearing about these other programs is fascinating. I don't think people will generally think of us for atmospheric science or biology or maybe the arts as much, but it's really interesting to me that those programs are thriving. And what you mentioned at the end is people can actually go see a show. They could, maybe familiarize themselves with, particularly that arts department a little bit more. I'm curious, what are some ways that we can promote to the public to get, the people here in Fort Collins to get more involved with CSU? A few years ago, I went to the Banff Film Festival for the first time, and I thought it was the coolest thing. Now I tell everybody, I think it was 5 years ago actually, that we went to the first one. And it's these really cool independent films in this big auditorium, and everybody's cozy in there, and it was just films you won't see anywhere else. And an amazing time. And I've talked to my wife since then, what else is going on here that we could involve ourselves with? So I'm curious if anything comes to your mind. Maybe you mentioned go and catch a play. The Banff Film Festival, for all of you listening, those tickets are on sale now. It's in February. Get them before they sell out. Banff is BANFF Film Festival. Google it. Google that and Colorado State University. I'm sure tickets will come up. But yeah, Martin, what are some other things that jump out at you?
Oh, to figure out how to tap into that.
Yeah, how do you tap into it? This amazing, I think people listening to this hear about the energy and all the fun things that are around you, and they're like, I want a hit of that.
Yeah,
it's right there in town. For those of you who don't know, Colorado State University is adjacent to Old Town. It's adjacent to this amazing downtown area that we're so lucky to have. It's right adjacent to it. You have this campus, 34,000 students approximately, I think, around there, and 1,200 faculty, all of the other positions to support this. This amazing university. How can we get more tapped in? Any suggestions, from the inside, the ways that us people in the public?
Of course, we've got the basketball teams and the volleyball team, the football
watch
team.
Sports, sure.
If you're into that, there's, the basketball games are super fun. The volleyball friendly, family friendly, all this. Even driving down Shields, you might see the women's soccer team out there playing, and you just pop in and watch a game. So the athletics are everywhere. But I mean, people remember back to their college days and they might go see something on a bulletin board, right? And you'd see something like, come to this art performance, or come to this dance performance, or come see this art exhibit. It's really just, it takes a little bit of work. We don't have like this big bulletin board that says everything to do. But if you really want to explore what the university offers, then the Laurie Student Center is a great place to get information on all the activities coming up on campus. And there's parking there if you need to drive onto campus and go plug the meter for $2 an hour or something like that. Go in there, chat someone up, and find out what's going on in campus.
Yeah, look up the Laurie Student Center, LORY. Is it weird if just a 43-year-old guy shows up at the Laurie Student Center and says, "Hey, I'd like to hear about what activities are going on"? I mean, that's acceptable?
I don't know. I don't think it'd be weird.
Okay.
There's people of all ages that are crawling up and down that campus.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if more people from outside the university are showing up there and doing that.
Yeah, I've got some people that have, like, retirees that have taken my classes. Right?
Really?
They've said, can I sit in on your class? And I say, yeah, sure. There's room. I'm happy to have you. Lots of people come back and take language classes for sure.
Yeah.
So a couple of people have been silly enough to take an economics class from me in their retirement years. But
I'd be super interested in that.
Yeah, for a while maybe. But it really is an amazing place. And when you work there for as long as I have, you forget those things. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about them, because it just kindles this flame in me about, like, this is just so much more than a job, right? This is an amazing place.
Well, yeah, I mean, most people are just showing up to work wherever, and I hope most people like their jobs. I think the statistics say that they don't. But they're showing up to their place of work. They're sitting down in front of a laptop, and it's quite different than your experience, which is going into this place filled with energy and optimism, and the ability to just affect somebody's trajectory, like, that 18-year-old coming in, and then, who is that person when they're leaving? You get to affect that. So I think that's super special. And I think a lot of us want to feel that energy. And I love one thing you said was taking a language learning class. I think, so many people are maybe in our own city here are, logging on to whatever app, or, Babel, or whatever language learning app they are using. They could actually take an in-person class at Colorado State University. They could roll over to Laurie Student Center. They could enroll in a language learning class. And wouldn't that be a more fun environment? You get to know some people. I think that would just be someone holding you accountable, right? You got to be there at this time. That's interesting. It never occurred to me in all these years I've been here. So I appreciate you mentioning it, that I could do that, because as you're saying that, I'm thinking, my son is 7, and we have an app, and we're doing Spanish in the mornings, and I'd like to maybe try to get him involved, somehow with me, and just get over to CSU and do more things. I mean, maybe it's not enrolling in a class, maybe it's hearing somebody talk, maybe there are other things, but I'm going to explore it more. Would encourage everybody else to as well.
Yeah.
It sounds like Laurie Student Center is the best gateway.
That is a great gateway to the university. The language is interesting. My wife and I, we went to Paris last spring break, and we decided that we would do a language app just for a few months, and we'd play a game, and we'd have a cocktail, and we would do this language app, and learned almost nothing of use other than how to say the bicycle is red or something like that. But like, if you go into a classroom, you're not getting away with that, right? Are held accountable, and you have the feedback and all these things. So yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, the classroom eliminates the ability to build a false level of confidence.
Right.
You are constantly getting tested. You're constantly getting real feedback.
We were never asked what color the bicycle was, so we had nothing to say in Paris.
Yeah, some of these apps, you pull them up and you were on the app for a while and it says you're like 14% proficient in the language or whatever your percentage is, 34%. But I do think that can lead to a false sense of confidence when you're actually thrown in and you're actually in that environment where you're speaking the language. But the closest thing to that real world is the classroom, where you have that teacher who's challenging you. You're probably getting into groups with other classmates and you're speaking and you're conversing. I think that's amazing. Where do you see the university going, just as we're kind of keeping this future focus?
Yeah, it's a really interesting time for higher education, in the sense that the demographics are not working in our favor right now, as we're kind of like what they've called this demographic cliff, in the sense that there's fewer young people, fewer 16, 17, 18-year-olds than there used to be. And CSU's pretty well positioned. Boulder's pretty well positioned to maybe take plateauing enrollments or only slightly growing enrollments. So I'm confident in CSU's ability to continue to thrive. I do worry about some of the other schools. Maybe some of the more rural schools sometimes are facing, the smaller universities are facing some enrollment challenges that the demography is not going to be as kind to, I think. So,
right. Yeah, you're going to see those schools suffer a little bit more. Maybe even some of those schools inside of the state suffer a little bit more.
Yeah, and I'm not going to call out any schools by name, but some of the regional schools do struggle a little bit when enrollments decline.
Sure, naturally. And it doesn't mean those aren't great schools. I think they are. It's just what happens when there are fewer students.
Yeah.
And you are competing with a CSU. If you are looking to stay in Colorado, for example, and go to college, you go to the CSU campus, you go to the Boulder campus at the University of Colorado. It's pretty challenging to compete with that atmosphere.
Yeah, it is. But at the same time, expensive. Education is getting expensive, and those regional schools offer a really good education for less than what we charge at CSU or what Boulder is. Smaller class sizes, so there's certainly benefits to those schools. Sometimes a more personal experience, maybe. And higher education, there's some people are questioning the value of it, right? That a lot of students are coming out with substantial amounts of debt, and we all know that on average, college graduates have higher incomes than people that don't have a college degree, and that's well established in the data. But as college gets increasingly expensive, then you start to question if that higher income actually can help you pay back your loans, right? It's an interesting and challenging time even for CSU.
Yeah, I think in the business community, just being really deep into the business community here, I think I have heard that more than ever before, at least, of maybe specifically in that business realm, kind of challenging the value of a college degree. I look back on my college experience, which was, undergrad at the University of Iowa, and then graduate school at the University of Denver, DU. And, for me, it was amazing because I remember I was the first class where there was an entrepreneur certificate offered at the University of Iowa Business School. And the first professor I had, he had just retired as the head of marketing for Burger King. He was behind like the Whopper campaign back in the day. And it was so fascinating. So I look back on my college experience. I think of that. I think of going to DU for my graduate work and being able to focus specifically on real estate and learning about construction and learning about financing. And for me, it was phenomenal. But I do think there are more people questioning that. And I wonder, do you have any thoughts on what you see CSU doing or what you think CSU could or should do to kind of be increasingly relevant, as the world is continuing to change?
Yeah, that's a question that I don't know if I have an answer to that one. We have to figure out a way of not saddling these folks with significant amounts of debt, right? It's we're trying to keep, the university's trying to contain its costs, of course, and the state is trying to support us to the best of their ability. But it's when I think about, I've got, and between my kids, I've got three of my own kids, and then I have two stepkids, and all five of them are just either in school or just wrapping up, and or just recently finished, and it's a lot of money to put to from the parental side to put these kids through school. And for their, if we were fortunate enough to be able to help out our kids a lot, other families can't, and to say, okay, well, you're going to graduate with $80,000-$90,000 in debt. That's a down payment on a house, right? Or even much more than that, right? And like kids coming out of school or young adults coming out of school with debt and with housing prices seemingly going up usually.
Well, particularly with where interest rates are at for both now compared to how long ago.
I do. And so you can imagine yourself as an 18-year-old or 19-year-old and saying, look, I'm going to go to school for 4 years. I'm going to have all this debt, and then housing's so expensive. I'm not going to be able to do this, right? And that's what kind of gets me a little bit is like, my kids are at that age where my youngest is 20, my stepson's 25, and we've got them all through there. And it's like, what are they going to be doing when they're 30? Are they going to be able to have a house by the time they're 31, 32 like I did, And that's on top of all my schooling that I did, right? But are you able to every one of us wants our kids to have a better life than we did, right? And this time when the finances feel like they're a little stacked against them that way.
Yeah. What are some things we can do to get them getting out of school with less debt? Is it just more scholarship programs? I mean, what's one solution?
Oh gosh. Well, asking the wrong person on this one, maybe, right? Like obviously, the state of Colorado provides about 1/3 of the cost of education for our in-state students, right? So we get CSU's primary funding sources for education are tuition and help from the state, revenues that are from the state of Colorado. It's about, right now, students are paying about 2/3 of the cost of their education, and the state's picking up about 1/3 of it. 30 years ago, 25 years ago, that ratio was flipped. So our tuition goes up, as it does go up, but it goes up in part because the state has backed off of their commitment a little bit, and there's legitimate reasons why. This, there's a lot of things the state can spend its money on. It's hamstrung a little bit by the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. There's a few things that we've got other needs. K-12 education, of course, is important. We've got an aging population. We got to provide medical support to them. So there's a lot of competing demands. But higher education has been kind of seen as low-hanging fruit in times of belt tightening, and so with a little bit of diminished support, it's a little bit harder. The tuition's got to go up to pay that, right? And there's legitimate debates about this, that, if a kid goes to college, then he's going to make the high wages, so he should pay for his college. You can understand that logic, but also these students do lots of wonderful things for the state beyond their own paycheck that make a public investment justifiable.
Sure. Yeah. So I think what you're saying, like there's an argument there to have that ratio kind of return maybe closer on some level to where it was previously. And really that's probably the primary way to have these kids coming out of school without $80,000, $90,000 debt or a lot more in debt, depending on depending on what they're doing, right? That's fascinating. I mean, I don't want to let you get out of here without talking about just renewable energy a little bit. I know you've done a lot of research in that realm. I mean, what kind of impact do you see that having presently in the future on our Fort Collins economy and our larger Larimer County economy?
Oh yeah, it's a great question. Colorado has always kind of been at the forefront of that transition, right? Not lagging a little bit compared to how we started out. We had the renewable portfolio standard, which requires a certain percentage of your electricity to be generated from renewable resources. And when you put such a mandate in place, then the innovators and entrepreneurs come out and say, well, how can we best meet this? And so we've done at CSU and other places a lot of work on renewables. We've got the Engines Lab, which is on North College Avenue, doing all sorts of really cool stuff. And there's a place to take a tour of. If you haven't, you can see all these alternative turbines and all these different ways of creating biofuels and all this stuff that's super cool. Yeah. You gotta just be nice. Walk in there with a smile, and
I love that.
Yeah,
you heard it here first. Walk in there, be nice, have a smile. It's just north of the river. We cross over kind of like that river area on North College Avenue. Driving north, you'll see it on the right-hand side.
Yeah, and if they got some time, they'll take you on a tour, give you a pair of safety glasses, and the director there's Brian Wilson, and he's just an absolute fabulous person to get to know in terms of his passion about renewable energy and like he got started on cook stoves, I think, like making cleaner cook stoves, because people in developing countries were burning firewood in their stoves in their home, and then the pollutants and were poisoning their families, and so he tried to figure out a way of cleaning up that. And then it's transitioned to this great enterprise over there in terms of all sorts of different things on renewables. We've so this has been a great laboratory for testing out new ideas. CSU's been on board with the renewable energy stuff for a long time. It's been pretty cool, and I've gotten dragged into this, and it was actually a project in our first project in renewables was Platte River Power Authority is moving to 100% renewables, right? And we were trying to figure out the economics of that transition. There's a couple things that that come up with the transition. Storage is obviously the big impediment. When the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, where do you get the electricity from? And so now that like the battery technologies and storage is super important. But those things are expensive. And so how do we pay for them? How do we protect lower income ratepayers from the rate increases necessary to finance that transition?
The Platte River Power Authority, that's where the city of Fort Collins buys their electricity from.
Correct.
So this is, for those of you listening, this is kind of where our power comes from.
Yeah. So that's how we got started in this, and then we just actually finished up a project with the National Renewable Energy Lab in Golden, looking at Puerto Rico's transition to 100% renewable. They have a mandate in Puerto Rico by 2050 to be 100% renewable, in a place that is very reliant on imported coal and oil for their power, and a place that's poor. Relatively poor and pretty susceptible to hurricanes, and their grid is fragile and it's outdated, and so this is a very expensive transition in a very poor place. And so we worked with them on figuring out pricing strategies and other things like that to help that transition come off kind of smoothly.
Wow, that's a big deal. And the Platte River Power Authority, what's their timeline for going 100% renewable? What's the goal?
The initial goal was 2030.
Okay.
So that's not far away from here.
Right.
And I know that they're pretty committed to that. So the Platte River Power Authority serves Loveland, Fort Collins, Estes Park, Longmont. Maybe those are the 4 major communities that they serve, and the governor, the city councils and others are on the boards of this. So it's the cities that are demanding this, right? It's pretty aggressive. But the people that we've worked with there are super committed to making this happen and trying to make it happen in an affordable way. So.
What's the what segment of that has the strongest potential, do you think, if you're looking at wind, if you're looking at solar? What's the one that has the most kind of potential?
I'm not the engineering type, but the solar panels have come down so much in cost.
And we get 300 days of sunshine. So that's the one that jumps out at me.
Yeah, so we're pretty well positioned. Southern Colorado is really well positioned. The main expense we're facing these days is storage.
Mm-hmm.
The sun doesn't shine at night.
Mm-hmm.
The wind's not always blowing.
So, and batteries to store the power.
Batteries, you think about batteries being the size of tractor trailer containers, or that size, and expensive, and the technology is progressing, but still pretty darn pricey, and that right there is, I think, the impediment right now. But super smart people working on that issue too.
Wow, that's fascinating. This has been great.
It's been fun.
Yeah, if people want to get to know you, follow you, learn more about your research, I mean, other than signing up for an economics class at CSU, which I might do at some point, how else can they follow you? How else can they learn more about what you're up to?
You can see my writings on Google Scholar. You can see all my publications there. But they should just, I say, come see my class. Come talk to me.
Yeah.
I mean, if you see my wife and me playing euchre at a bar in Old Town, come talk to me.
Yeah, you have always been open to talking to anybody. I mean, again, going back to the start of this conversation, watching you speak at all the big forums, I remember this clearly. There was not anybody who you just were not willing to have a conversation with, staying after. So appreciate that about you. Appreciate you coming onto my show. And my wife reaches out to you and you respond right away and you're in. And that's just, it's really great. So glad to have you in town. Really appreciate this conversation. I think everybody else did as well. Dr. Martin Shields, everybody, stay in touch, and I hope to be in touch with you again soon.
Thanks. Have a great holiday, everyone.
All right. Thanks. Cheers.